Hello everyone. Thanks for coming. So quick question. How many of you have Windows workloads running? Because if you have raised your hand, you might have entered in the wrong session, okay? Because we're gonna be talking about Windows workloads here. So that's just like some advice. My name is Arthur. I'm a solution architect out of Vancouver. I'm a public sector solution architect, which means that I have some of my customers with you today. It's a great thing like to see familiar faces. I also have extensive familiarity with Windows workloads. In a previous life, I worked migrating Active Directory, Exchange servers, System Center workloads. I also have a strong background in .NET, which I believe it's one of the best programming languages that we ever had. So I really like .NET. I worked in healthcare for 3 years. So I know how public sector works from the inside. So I know the challenges that we all have as a public sector employees. And then I've been working with AWS for over than 2 years. So that's a little bit of the background that I can give to you. So let's get started. So the topic today is simplifying Microsoft workloads. And these are the challenges that I've seen in my customers. So I'm also part of a team at AWS that help customers all over the world to adopt Microsoft applications on AWS. And then questions that I constantly hear from them is, what can I do about my Active Directory? How can I use Active Directory on AWS? What about my corporate applications, Office 365, SharePoint, Dynamics, System Center? Can I use SQL Server? What is the best practices to use SQL Server? How can I use SQL Server in a way that can be reliable and also have high availability? How can I deploy all of this in a way that's predictable and also I can do in a safe way? How can I migrate my workloads? What about .NET architecture? Can I migrate my .NET legacy applications? How can I benefit from the latest and greatest tools that the cloud can give to me using .NET? And how can I simplify Microsoft workloads? How can I manage them in a way that would be simpler for me to manage? So I hope I can touch in all those challenges today, and I can help you to onboard your Windows workloads in the cloud. So, but before I get to that, I would like to remind you the pace of innovation that AWS has. It is amazing. Actually, it fascinates me how fast AWS innovates and adopts some of the features. So AWS started its journey with Windows in 2008. And then you can see how fast we actually offered new features for Windows. And then have 62 instance types. So instance types that it makes sense for you, which lots of memory, lots of CPU. You can also use different AMIs, which is Amazon Machine Image. So you can spin up a Windows server that already has IIS server installed in them, or maybe a SQL server installed in your image. So all those images are already available for you. And these are the features that we released recently. You can expect for more features in a month from today, so during reInvent. I don't know how many of you are going to be at reInvent, but this is where the excitement happens, to have Auntie Jessie on stage announcing super cool features and services. I also going to be at reInvent this year, presenting about how you can make enterprise applications connecting with Active Directory and .NET. So I have a talk during reInvent this year. Okay, how can you simplify the infrastructure environment? So first and foremost, everything starts with networking, right? And that's why I have the Amazon Virtual Private Cloud, the VPCs, showing up for you. The intent here is to show that whenever you think about Active Directory, let's say System Center, any other application that you have shared with other applications, it goes to a central location like a shared services VPC. And from your shared services VPC, you connect all your applications to your shared services like Active Directory. You might as well have like in A, B, and C VPCs like production, QA, and test. And all those workloads, they have to authenticate in Active Directory. So in the first one, the shared services VPC would have a hub and spoke scenario where you have a central shared VPC connecting through VPC peering with all the VPCs. The caveat with that structure is that if you're connecting from on-prem, you won't be able to connect to your resources, your servers, on the VPC A, B, and C, because the VPCs, they not route like between them. So it's not transitive. If you wanted to have a transitive VPC, then you go to the second option, which requires you to have third-party tools like Cisco routers, Palo Alto VPNs that tunnel your VPC traffic into VPN, and your VPN gets routed in, amongst all the VPNs. So that way you can have meshed, let's say, networking where all of your VPCs talk to any other VPCs. It's a little bit more complex because you have to configure your routers, your VPN routers, but you can also have the benefit that you can do also package inspection in your CSRs or in Palo Altos or checkpoints of the world. So two different ways you can do it. If you're more interested in knowing how you can structure your multi-account strategy, please come talk to us. We have several solutions architects sitting on the Ask the Experts booth in the hall. And then we can show you how you can structure multi-account strategy, including the newest solution that we just launched called landing zones. And then you can just expand that to you later. But back to the main topic of today, which is Microsoft workloads. How I can have Active Directory up and running in the cloud. So the first option, it's the more intuitive one for whoever manages Active Directory, is to extend your existing Active Directory to the cloud. And the way you do it, you just go into your AWS account, you spin up 2 domain controllers to have high availability, 1 in each availability zone. And then you have your domain controllers talking to your domain controllers on-prem. In order to have your domain controllers in the cloud synchronizing with domain controllers on-prem, you have to have either a VPN or a direct connection configured between your on-prem and AWS. You also have to make sure that your site links are proper configured. So you don't have a situation where your user sitting on-prem, you'll be authenticating against a domain controller sitting on the cloud. So that would be the simplest and easiest way to get your existing Active Directory up and running. Because at the end of the day, let's face it, it's just domain controllers synchronizing attributes in the cloud. So that's the first option for you to use it. Second option would be, you know what, I wanted to have my own Active Directory. I wanted to have a separate forest. Instead of having one forest that I'm extending to the cloud, I would have 2 forests. And I will establish AD trust between my forests. It could be either be a one-way trust or bidirectional way trust. And then you have a new icon in the screen. So you can also see your domain controllers that you can create on top of virtual servers. We called our virtual servers EC2. But you can also have the option now to use AWS Manage AD. And then I don't know how many of you know AWS Manage AD, but that's a super cool idea. So I really don't like to patch servers. I don't know how many you like to patch servers and then set up like maintenance windows and configure all the patching process. Whenever you use AWS Manage AD, AWS manage your domain controllers for you. So you all have to be concerned about the Active Directory that you have to manage. So the user accounts, the objects that goes into AD, but everything else AWS takes care for you. So that's an option that runs on top of AWS, and then you can use it and also does the trust with your on-prem Active Directory. Let me see, I just skipped one. Okay. Federation services. It's not per se like Active Directory solution, but I've seen a lot of companies using web applications into the cloud. And those web applications, they require you to authenticate you like in your Active Directory. So one of the options and then I've done that a lot. I was implementing federation services for healthcare. You can use ADFS, Active Directory Federation Services, that talks SAML. So then when using SAML, your web server would rather redirect you to your Active Directory. And that Active Directory can be sitting in the cloud, again, using a domain controller or a AWS Managed AD, or you can go all the way to your on-prem and authenticate your user, which I won't recommend you doing because latency comes into play, right? And then again, you have to have VPN configured or the direct connect, so your ADFS can talk to your domain controller on-prem. So not only federation services can be utilized, you can utilize any other provider that uses SAML, like Ping Identity, Office 365. So all those applications can easily talk to ADFS or any other application sitting on AWS. And there is a new option that AWS released recently. We have a solution called AWS Organizations. And then AWS Organization, it's a way that you can actually organize your AWS accounts. Whenever I talk to customers about AWS Organizations, they kind of confuse it with Active Directory. It's kind of funny because they think AWS Organization has user accounts in it. But all it does, it manages AWS accounts. And within each AWS account, you manage your resources independently. So that's how it works. The benefit of using organizations is you can roll up all the billing to the master account. So we won't have like different billings. So only one account pays for everything. We can also set up rules that prevents people to use services in specific accounts. So you can lock down some services for people that are experimenting the cloud. And now we can also have different benefits, which is share your directory. So with AWS Organizations and share your directory, I can have AWS Managed AD. And then instead of having the ADs in Active Directory in domain controller sitting in all my accounts, I can share the metadata from my Active Directory into all the other accounts that are linked into my organization. So in that way, if I have to domain join a server, I don't have to domain join a server that's sitting in my AWS account. It kind of routes it through to my domain controller that's sitting in a central account in my organizations. So share your directory was released maybe a month ago. And then it's also an option for you that uses organizations. You want to centralize authentication in one place only. And then also when you talk about Active Directory and identity, it also makes a lot of sense for you to use Active Directory to allow your users to connect to AWS accounts. And that's one of the things we encourage enterprises in doing. So every time I go talk to enterprise, one of the asks, actually I ask two questions. Are you using MFA, which is a multi-factor authentication? Because if you connect into your AWS account yourself, using root account or an account that has admin privileges, you should be using MFA. And then second question, if you're not using MFA, why not using SAML with AWS accounts? So you would have Active Directory configured in a way that your users will be accessing AWS accounts, multiple accounts, by the way, not only one account, mapping to roles. It's super cool. ADFS has the option, and then I have a demo if you're interested, and I can show you later, that you can connect to ADFS and saying, I want to connect to AWS. And then it shows which account do you want to connect and what role you want to connect with. So each role defines your permissions. So in that way, I can link them together using identity access management on AWS accounts. And then from my roles, I can grant access to EC2, DynamoDB, S3, or whatever services your user requires to access. And the beauty of using AD with an AWS account is that if a user leaves your company for any reason, you don't have to terminate an account on the AWS site. So the life cycle policy for a user, it stays in Active Directory. So now let's move to SQL servers. So AWS offers you two flavors of a SQL server. One, it's RDS, our SQL as a service, let's say, platform. So as you can see it with the color coding, so AWS manages everything on RDS. It manages the scaling, the high availability, the backups, patching. So everything AWS takes care for you in regards to infrastructure. And then I really like it. So let me give an example. I'm a .NET developer. And then I have to, whenever I'm testing stuff, writing new code, I need a SQL Server to test it out. I don't have to go ahead and ask for someone to stand up a SQL Server for me. I go to RDS, I stand up a new server, like with a tiny, like a machine. I won't be paying much, and then I can just start testing. I don't have to be worried about patching. I don't have to be worried about high availability. So if a server fails, AWS automatically fails over for you and takes care of the DNS entry point, so all of that happens for you automatically. So I have a website up and running. I'm going to show you in a moment. Then I'm going to tell a story how I moved that website from on-prem to almost completely native cloud website. And then I'm still using RDS because one of my helpers, they deleted one of my tables accidentally. And then what I have to do was to go back to my backup that RDS takes from me every 5 minutes, and then restore from there. So every 5 minutes, it backs up for you. I mean, I'm a huge fan of RDS. But there will be some cases that RDS won't be the best fit for you. Let's say you using SSIS, which is a ETL component for a SQL Server, using reporting services, which also connects in a different way with SQL Server. And then you go to the second option, that is to use SQL Server on top of EC2 instances. So we'll have a virtual server like you would have on-prem running SQL Server. So it will be no different from that. And then by having a SQL Server running on EC2 instances, you can also do some cool stuff, like setting up AlwaysOn Cluster. So you can have AlwaysOn Cluster running on AWS. And that diagram that you see here, actually I copied from the quick start. So if you see the link up top, so we have a web page that shows you, and then not only shows you, but guides you how to configure several types of applications. Being one of those applications, SQL AlwaysOn. So by the end of the guide that you follow, you're going to have the exactly same diagram you're seeing right here, which is have a 2-node AlwaysOn cluster up and running on AWS. I have one of my customers. We had a long discussion about which would be the most appropriate service for him to utilize, RDS or EC2 or SQL Server on EC2. And then it went back and forth, cost being one of the options, being able to use AlwaysOn because he was a big fan of AlwaysOn. And it comes down to what's your SLA, how much do you want to manage your infrastructure, because patching, backups, those things takes time and requires people to take care for you. So he ended up using AlwaysOn, but now he's considering moving some of the AlwaysOn instances that he configured to RDS. And then he would have maybe 2 type of SQL options for his customers. And then what you're seeing here, do not be scared. I will explain a little bit to you. It's a diagram of a typical application that runs on AWS, like a typical Microsoft application. So we'd have your web servers, your IIS servers, and then I'm going to get your IIS servers in a bit. Maybe your application services using auto-scaling group. You have your SQL Server as a backend for them. You can also be using RDS or SQL Server on top of virtual servers. Active Directory, as you can have your servers being domain joined, or maybe you're authenticating users using Active Directory. But what I really like about AWS is not because you can run any type of workload that you can possibly think, being like a Microsoft, Linux, whatever you think. But you can enrich and you can manage your application in a way that's simpler than on-prem, because all the services that you can use from us. So you can have security services from key management services. You have a cloud certificate manager. You can use systems manager I don't know how many of you have used Systems Manager, but Systems Manager is a lifesaver. And then I'll explain you to why and how I have used it. AWS config that if something changes in your architecture, so let's say someone changes an instance type or a firewall rule, config notifies you. And config lets you take actions to revert back whatever a fat thing has done to you. S3, object storage, you can store all your logs into a central location. And then from there, you can run analytics and identify any anomaly that might be happening in your application that you have never noticed before. CloudTrail, that's auditing. Everything that you do in AWS is an API call. And because it's an API call, we record that API call for you. And then it happened to me once. I was in a customer. I was delivering what we called immersion days. So immersion days, we go deep in a specific service. I was talking about security. And then one guy came in the room that was like teaching the other people, saying, sorry to interrupt, but our database server was stopped. And then we need to know who has done it. I said, perfect timing. So let's go to CloudTrail. And then in CloudTrail, we were able to see who has done it and when and why, not why, but when was done it. And then that guy was actually sitting in my class. You should pay attention to me, my friend. He was like trying to work and why pay attention, and then he stopped the wrong server. So that what happened. And that's a typical like architecture that I would see. One thing I would say about web servers, and I like to challenge my customers. Let me tell right now, I like to challenge them. And then whenever I see a customer using IIS servers that need to be domain joined, I say, why? Why do we have to have a web server that needs to be domain joined? What type of service that requires you to have a domain join? And then he goes, you know what, I have to have my technical people connecting to my web servers so they can figure it out what's going wrong. Okay, explain to me what do they do like for troubleshooting? So they check logs. Okay, why don't you use our Systems Manager that you can send all your logs, and when I say all your logs, I'm saying your event logs, your IIS logs, whatever application logs that you have to CloudWatch logs. And then by sending all of them to one central location, you don't have to have people connecting to your server. You just check your logs right there. And then he goes, but you know what? I have some like a playbooks they have to execute. If you're talking about IIS server, maybe resetting IIS server, maybe resetting the application pool. Say, why do you have to have people connecting to it? Using Systems Manager. Systems Manager, you can run PowerShell scripts against your servers. And it gives you the benefit to have auditing. You can see who has done it, goes to CloudTrail. You can create policies that you can pinpoint who has access to those playbooks. I think why then do you have to have a domain join machine? Because when you have the domain join machine for a web server, and then whenever you need to scale up and down, specifically scale up, right? And then you have to domain join during scaling up, it takes forever. Because you have to boot a machine, and then it joins back to the domain, and then you have to execute some scripts, maybe to install IIS, maybe to inject your code. So then by the time you need to have your server up and running, because you have maybe a high traffic, that traffic's gone. Because it took you like 50 minutes to boot a server. So that's one of the things I've been helping my customers in doing, to move away from these sometimes not required domain join machines to something that makes more sense. Okay, how can you simplify the deployment? So okay, that is one of the services that is underestimated. Some people, they are afraid of CloudFormation. I won't blame them, okay? I would say I sympathize with them. But CloudFormation, it's underestimated. I really like CloudFormation for several reasons. So as you can see, I can have one file. In that file, I can describe my entire infrastructure. I can say how many servers I want. If I want to have auto-scaling group, what is the metrics that my auto-scaling group is going to utilize? I can even define a database server and define dependencies that my workload requires me to implement. And then when I have my CloudFormation with all my application servers listed there, and let's say I need to test it out. I need to maybe give it to a developer so that he can develop a new feature. And then I just give a JSON file, YAML file to him, say, go crazy. You spin up that entire infrastructure in your own account, do all the testing that you need to do, and then once you finish, send it back to me. And then I can change my CloudFormation. In CloudFormation, you only be changing what you have changed, or deleting whatever you have deleted. So it's very handy, predictable, because you know exactly what you can expect for CloudFormation. And then one of the best benefits, you have DR solution right there, right off the gate. Because with CloudFormation, if something goes like south, for any reason, I can easily get my CloudFormation script and spin up a new infrastructure in a different place, as long as you have the backup for your database sitting in that same place. Because the CloudFormation does not keep your database, right? So the data, then have to back it up and restore. But everything else, you can deploy in a different location in a matter of minutes. And talking about CloudFormation, so remember when I mentioned to you the SQL always on, that I stole the diagram from the quick start. So that's the quick start. So if you're thinking of playing with some Microsoft workloads, some Microsoft tools on AWS, you can go to quick start. You can pick, let's say I wanted to play with link server, SharePoint server. You go to SharePoint server, quick start, and then there's a CloudFormation script that you can utilize. And that CloudFormation script is going to execute whatever you see in that diagram. And that's beauty, because you can check the CloudFormation script, you can copy, you can adapt, you can implement in a way that your company, your enterprise can utilize. You can just reuse whatever was already created for you. So go into quick start, go crazy, test stuff out, and check the CloudFormation scripts. Simplifying migration. How can I migrate my servers to AWS? So whenever you talk about migration, we talk about three aspects, right? People, process, and technology. So that's an old thing that we all know about it. But when I talk technology here, this is the phases that typically we have. So discovery phase. So we have partners that have developed some tools already for you to migrate. You can notice at the end, we have AWS Application Discovery Services. This is one of the services that we offer you, that you can do an inventory of your applications. And then you can then decide what makes sense for you to migrate first, and checks all your dependencies. So what makes sense, let's say a database, it's connected to 5 applications. So let's maybe migrate all the applications, then the database. We also have a service that migrates your server for you. AWS Server Migration Service. I'm going to talk a little bit about it in the next slide. And another service that migrate databases. So AWS Database Migration Services, AWS DMS, allows you to migrate a SQL server that's sitting on-prem to a SQL server that's sitting in the cloud, and vice versa. So I've done it. It works pretty well. I also tested migrating my SQL server into Postgres, because DMS also does schema changes. So it transforms the schema from SQL Server, whatever database you have, to a different version of the vendor database. You can transfer your data to the cloud. Different options. Snowball comes to mind. I've been helping customers copying data to Snowball. So Snowball, for those who doesn't know what it is a device that you order, and then you can copy up to 100 terabytes of data to it. And then you ship it back to AWS, and then it copies all the data to your S3 bucket. And then from there, you can just restore, let's say it's a database backup, and then you can restore a database from there. I have one of my customers. We started discussing about Snowmobile. So that customer has 25 petabytes of data. So there is no Snowball for us to move it. So we're discussing with them to use Snowmobile, which is a truck that can carry over 100 petabytes of information, and copy them over to AWS. So different ways you can move data. And then you can also monitor your application using CloudWatch and an AWS config that checks all the changes your configuration had happened in case someone changed your application. So AWS Server Migration Services currently only works on VMware. So expect news on that. But what I like about it is agentless. So don't have to install any agent in your servers. So it copies the data in incremental changes from your VMware server to AWS Cloud. And then you can select like a multiple servers. Let's say this is one application that I have, and then I'm gonna move all that application first, and then move it like part by part. And then once the migration is over, you can just code over. So you know what? Done. Now all my servers are copied to AWS Cloud. I can just stop my servers on-prem and start those servers up and running on AWS. Easy and peasy migration. And you can also check the status of your migration. So with Migration Hub, you can not only see the status, you can check third-party tools that does migration for you. Because most of the third-party tools that we offer connect to the Migration Hub. And then you can see how many servers were migrated, how many databases were migrated in one single location, one dashboard for you to keep track of your migration. Simplify .NET development. That's one of my favorite topics. So I don't know how many of you have played with AWS and C#, but let's agree that Visual Studio is the best IDE ever developed. I'm a really big fan of Visual Studio, right? And then it would be awesome to have access to all AWS resources from Visual Studio. And done. Your dreams come true. Now you can just install AWS Toolkit for Visual Studio, and then you can have access to all the resources that AWS offers you right there. And then it really helps you to develop to AWS. And then that's the beginning of my journey of migrating my application that I had sitting on servers to the cloud. So I had that application that helps my kids' school to keep volunteer hours. I don't know how many of you have to do volunteer hours. It's a pain in the back. And then people keep in track using spreadsheets. Guys, I can do it for you. So I developed an application in C# using Microsoft SQL Server, and then was running on servers. And then I started working on AWS, and then you know what? I'm gonna use these applications as my playground. And then using Visual Studio, I connect to Elastic Beanstalk. So Elastic Beanstalk is our platform as a service. And then I right-click, I'm not kidding, I right-click on the Elastic Beanstalk and says, deploy. And then it asks me two questions. How many servers you wanted to deploy? Do we want to have a load balancer in front of those? And then deploy. My application was up and running on AWS in minutes from Visual Studio. So and that's the portfolio that we offer you. As I mentioned, you have Elastic Beanstalk. So right-click, deploy. You can benefit from code build, code deploy. A little story that I also have, I developed an application using containers. So whenever using ASP Core, .NET Core, you can use containers running on top of Linux machines. So I currently develop my application using my Mac, using .NET Core. And I deploy those applications in ECS using Docker. And all that happens using a CI/CD model, continuous integration, continuous deployment. And these tools, code build, code deploy, I have utilized them to automatically deploy my application into my ECS containers. So it's beautiful. All I have to do is to commit my code to code commit, which is a GitHub inside AWS. And then from there, it triggers the entire process. And that's what the process looks like. I have my source, and then once I commit my source, goes to build. So in build, I have two processes specifically for .NET. I have one process that compiles my C#, right? And then once my C# is compiled, I have a second process that gets the compiled code and injects into a different container that has the binaries for .NET Core to execute them. So I have, again, if you're interested in seeing how that works, I also have a demo. You can come to me, I can show you like working, how the CI/CD pipeline all works with C#. And then you deploy your application using different tools. I use CloudFormation to deploy my application, but you could might as well use Code Deploy, use Elastic Beanstalk, whatever you think makes sense for you, you can deploy your application. And the AWS Cold Start was also launched recently. It kind of exposes you to all those tools without you configuring them. So I can go to ASP.NET Core and say I wanted to deploy a web application. And then you'll be able to see all the steps that AWS already created to automatically deploy your application. So AWS Cold Start, it's a good place for you to get yourself like your foot wet in how all those tools comes together. And then if you use VSTS, Visual Studio Team Services, you can also integrate that with AWS. I invite you to install the add-on for VSTS. And then once you have the add-on installed, you would be able to deploy to Amazon ECR. You'll be able to deploy to a Lambda function. You'll be able to execute any run command. And then with your run command, you can deploy all your applications using VSTS. So I mean, AWS is really investing in supporting Microsoft workloads. As you can see, we have an add-on too for Visual Studio. We have an add-on for VSTS. I'm going to be talking about SIS Manager that also helps you to deploy whatever you need into the servers. And how can I simplify my .NET architecture? So let me show you something quickly. Let me change here. So that's the website I was talking about. That's my kids' school website. And this front page here, it's sitting on S3. Okay, I'm not still running my .NET. I'm using S3 with CloudFront. But if I go and click to login, it's redirecting me to app.participationhours.com. But what just happened here, my application, it does not do authentication. The way I have configured, it says, you know what? You have to authenticate against identity provider. My identity provider is Cognito. So Cognito, it's one of AWS services that gives you authentication services. And I'm using OpenID, which is a form to authenticate. So I'm going to put my username. So what's happening now while I'm authenticating? I'm getting all my information, all the information of all the my user information, and I'm saving in a DynamoDB table, because that's my session state. So if you developed to like a web application, you have to use session state, and that's my application. That's actually it's in production. This is not like a playground only. Like if I mess stuff up with my application, I have parents call me. Right? I cannot play too much. And then you can see it's a nice look and feel, isn't it? So I have like a table. I have a chart. And then what if I tell you that I don't have a single server running in that application? Would you believe me? What if I tell you that web server is running on Lambda functions? So a Lambda function is what we call serverless computing on AWS. So my web server, the guys you're seeing right here, is completely serverless. So the only server that I have is a SQL database, because that information comes from a SQL database. And then it's a website. So if I go add participation hours, I have a pop-up that comes, and then this menu comes from my database, which I save everything in a session state. Okay, I'm gonna put some information here. and done. Right? And then I'm using all the cool services that AWS offers me. So for instance, I haven't saved into my database automatically. Every time I write into my database, I actually put that information into a queue first. Because it's a loosely coupled like a scenario. So if I ever have to do a maintenance in my database, my users will never be impacted. Because they all sending to a queue, and then I have a Lambda function that reads my queue and then saves into my database. So if I refresh the page, or if I have something that refreshes automatically, here's my record, right? And then if I want to, I can manage. I can approve, deny. So it's a system. Actually, it's working, right? So the people are using it. It's not so different from web applications you've seen out there. I have a database that I have to access to, and then again, it's completely running serverless. I have Cognito that does my authentication, sends me a JWT token. That the JWT token lives in a cookie, and then that's why my ASP.NET Core is capable to, from that token, does everything that I need to do. Serverless is not only cool, I have to admit, I really like serverless, right? But serverless is also more secure because there is no server for you to break in. If someone, for any reason, has access, like exploit, let's say a new vulnerability of a .NET, he only has 30 seconds of execution. Maybe 15 seconds of execution, because it depends how much I say my Lambda function will be executed, right? And then in front of my Lambda function, I have API gateway. API gateway restricts how many executions per second you can have. So it's not only cool, but it's also safer than any other implementation that would be using servers, okay? Here I also have, quickly I want to show you my database. That's actually a real database. That's my RDS server. And then you can see CPU utilization, how many connections I have. I can, let me hide this. It's a T2 micro type of server. So I'm paying that application from my own pocket. So I'm a cheap person. So I choose like the cheapest option that I could ever choose from AWS. And it's working perfectly. You could see, like the website's fluid, so it's not so different from what you've seen in your database. And if I go to my account that's running, it's not configured here. Anyway, so let me switch back to my presentation. So, how can I simplify my .NET architecture? So I would say, use .NET Core as much as you can. So when I have customers asking me, you know what, I have a new application that I wanted to develop in C#, what should I use? .NET Core. I mean, immediately. Why? One, because I believe it's the feature of .NET. I like the cross-platform. It's lovely. Look, I have a Mac, and then I'm developing that application that I've showed you. I'm using Visual Studio for Mac. I'm not using Windows, not because I don't like Windows, it's because I want to experiment using like a different platform for developing .NET. It's working perfectly. It's modular, lightweight. Whenever I use .NET Core with containers, my containers, they typically have 100 megabytes. So it's easy to replace a container when you have to have an update in your code. I can run .NET Core in a Lambda function, not only .NET Core, but ASP.NET Core, as you guys just saw it. Can run in a container, I can run in an EC2, like in a virtual server, if I have to. And performance. So .NET Core version 2, not the first version, but the version 2, boy, it is fast. So one of the companies, like Cloud Guru. So Cloud Guru is one of the partners that AWS has. They had like every year they test Lambda functions performance. They were actually surprised to see that .NET Core was the fastest one in their testing. So, and Werner Vogels loves it. So what else should I say if Werner Vogels likes a C#? So, and this is quickly, not to go too much into the weeds, but how you can use authentication with .NET Core. So you always leverage incognito. So the way I have done it, I'm using API gateway in front of a Lambda function. In my API gateway, I say every time someone comes and try to use my service, you make sure that they have a token presented to you, a JWT token. So if they don't have a JWT token, go get one incognito. So that's what I instruct my API gateway. But if you want to, let's say we have just servers, EC2 servers, you can give the exactly same instruction to a load balancer. You can say, whenever people connect to my web server in this specific URL, if you don't have a token, go get one. And you can instruct where they should have to get this token. And in our case, I'm pointing to incognito. And finally, if you don't want to use API gateway or load balancer, you can use C# middleware. So if you develop like in C#, you can develop your own middleware that connects to whatever identity provider you want to give you your credentials, to give you the token to you. So it's easy for you to implement any other type of provider. And simplify management. So Systems Manager, this is a lifesaver again. So I mentioned to you that you can run commands. So run commands, you can have a playbook in PowerShell that you can literally do whatever you want. So whatever you can do in PowerShell, you can execute against your fleet of servers. It's not just one server. I can just select like hundreds of servers and say execute this command against all those servers. I can do patch management. So I don't have to, if you guys have SCCM, feel free to use it. It still works. If you have WSUS, same thing. But if you want to use AWS's native solution, we have patch management for you too. So you can patch your servers. You can do state manager. So with state manager, I can define some rules that says, I want all my servers to be patched and give me a report if they are not patched. I want that all my servers use encrypted volumes and give me like a dashboard if they are not encrypted. So I can check the state of my servers in the way they make sense for me. Have inventory. It runs inventory for you and you can see what was installed, when the server is up and running, if you had any failure. You can use Systems Manager agent, and again, just to reinforce the message because I really like that option, to send all the logs to CloudWatch logs. And then from CloudWatch logs, you can run queries and try to make an analysis. So I have one of my customers, they still have literally hundreds of servers, IIS servers. And they have to keep all the IIS logs stored for compliance reasons. And then they were struggling against, okay, how can I do it? So I suggested them to ship all the logs to CloudWatch logs. And then from there, to send it to, transform it to Parquet. So Parquet, it's a binary format column base that's faster for Athena to query. And then I said, every time you need to query an IIS log, you can use Athena. They loved it. They're still using it because they are consolidating in one location, and then they can execute Athena, which is our serverless database, against the logs and get any information from there. And how can you connect your servers, your like Windows servers? One option would be using a remote desktop gateway. So you have all your servers sitting on AWS, private IP addresses. You won't be able to access them through the internet. And then the best way to do it, have a RD gateway, remote desktop gateway, that once you jump to this remote desktop gateway, you can manage your servers. Or you can also use Systems Manager. Here's the boy back, right? You can use Systems Manager to connect to your instances. The only caveat here, it's not UI. You get a PowerShell CLI, okay? You won't get like a full Windows servers because there is no server. You're not connecting to a server. You're connecting to a service. And that service runs commands against your machines. So that's what it does at the end of the day. You run commands on the fly and execute those commands against your servers. So that's one option that you can present, and it is secure. I would say safer than have a bastion host. And then you can also use CloudWatch logs, as I already mentioned that to you, in a way that you can have Lambda functions, Redshift. You can even send notifications regarding to any information from your machines. One thing I forgot to mention, you can also send performance monitor metrics to CloudWatch. So let's say you typically monitor something using performance monitor in Windows. You can send those to CloudWatch Watch as well. And then AWS likes you so much that you give you some services that sometimes people don't realize you offer you. So let's say you're concerned about your costs. You know what? You can have a cost optimization monitor running in Elasticsearch. It gets all your cost details, and then once it gets it, it shows you how you're spending your money on AWS. So you can not only do it, but you can also get all the logs that you have from, let's say, IIS, from Windows event logs, and have them showed in Elasticsearch as well, once you have them consolidated in one location. Finally, we have partners. Some of those partners are here as well that have proved they have technical proficiency in Windows workloads. They already have helped customers in being successful in their journey in adopting Windows workloads. So we developed this AWS competency. That's a Windows competency. So we can just go ahead and then talk to these guys. We really like partners. So they help us. They help you. They have a large experience already. So TriNimbus is already here, Onika. So yeah, partners is always a great way to implement your workloads. With that, guys, thank you very much. Don't forget to submit your feedback. And thanks for having you guys here.